Hi students, I wanted to give you a brief overview of this assignment 3 test taking, and I'm going to try and put the emphasis on brief here because I think I ran a little bit long in my last assignment overview. So test taking as an assignment is pretty straightforward. This assignment came out of the QEP in large part because of the math department. So you may have noticed I'm an English teacher first before I teach student success, and we don't have many tests, so this is an issue for us. Most of our assignments are essays and research projects. But for the math department, they said a lot of students struggle with test taking, with knowing what to study, how to study for it, struggling with test anxiety is part of what they've seen, and making careless errors. So all of these things factor into test taking. And I think chapter 9 in your book really does a good job giving you some strategies for developing your memory and for taking tests. And really, you've got to be your own advocate with that chapter and use those little exercises and boxes and questions to reflect as you read and think about, does this pertain to me? Maybe you're someone for whom test anxiety plays a big part. You study a lot and then you get to the test and you think, oh my gosh, what happens? It all went up in smoke. Now I can't remember anything. Or maybe you're someone for whom, test anxiety isn't a big part of it, but you read over your notes and you just think, well, why isn't it staying with me? I don't understand. And I think it does give you some strategies. Maybe some of them you're aware of, maybe some you're not, and you want to try something different. And that's what we're hoping will happen with Chapter 9. Now, I just wanted to chime in and give you a little bit of food for thought with Chapter 5 and Chapter 11, because you may be saying, well, what do critical thinking and wellness have to do with test taking? But critical thinking, about a big part of it is assessing what you know and what you don't know and asking the right questions. So perhaps you're someone who tends to study material for a test, and then you get to a test and you go, oh my gosh, I studied, but I studied the complete wrong thing. And you might blame your teacher. Maybe you say, well, they didn't tell us what to study. And that may be true. Maybe your teacher didn't give you much guidance on what to study, and there was so much that you just studied the wrong things. But even with that, it's your job as a student to determine what to study, and that's where critical thinking comes in. Maybe you need to be proactive and approach your instructor and say, listen, your PowerPoints and lecture materials seem very different than what is in the textbook. Should I be studying both for this test, or is there something different that I should study? What should I be looking at? And I apologize for this click-clack in the background. My dog is walking around. He has been asleep for the whole day, and now I sit down to make this recording. And of course, on our tile and wood floors, he is just doing laps around the house. So please ignore the click-clacking. Anyway, back to this. Chapter 5, critical thinking, deals with that. And then Chapter 11 deals with wellness. And again, you might say, well, how does exercise and, staying healthy, what does that have to do with test taking? But a lot of times, if you have accumulated absences or if you're distracted by sickness, those kind of things, then that's going to cause you to do poorly on the test. And whether it's because you miss the material or because you're not feeling well when you take the test or things of that nature. And those things can be real distractions in your life. So those chapters, you want to think about as you're reading them, how do they pertain to test taking? In addition, they stand alone on themselves as having their own good questions and answers about what it takes to be a successful student, even not related to test taking. So your assignment for assignment 3 is to create a 10-question test for a course you're currently taking. So hopefully not SLS, we don't have tests in this course, but I'm thinking, biology or humanities, any course that you think you're going to have a test in. And so it asks that you include 2 of the following. So 2 true-false type questions, 2 matching, 2 fill in the blank, 2 multiple choice, and 2 short answer or essays. And really short answer or essay will probably depend on what kind of course you're pulling from to create these questions. You also want to create answers to those questions. So you can't just create the questions themselves, but you need an answer key. Then the next step is, and so you want to be thinking ahead with this, this is why I wanted you to read this before we get into the submission phase, is make an appointment with your professor of this course to get feedback on the quality of your questions and answers. So you may even know some of them. You might say, well, my instructor never would ask a true-false question in mathematics or something like that. And maybe you know that they're going to say, well, this isn't the type of question we would ordinarily give. But really, I think from teaching this in the past, students have gotten some good conversation, and the dialogue between them and their instructor has been good. You want to document the visit with your professor somehow, so you can get their signature on your test or have them send an email to you or to me. I've had it work any kind of way that you can provide some kind of documentation. And then finally, on another page, assess what you've learned in this activity. What kind of feedback did your professor give you? Were they real cursory with it, like, yeah, that looks good, and then they rushed you out? Or did they give you some kind of substantial feedback saying, yes, these are the kinds of things that would be on the test? What worked well for you in terms of making this test? So that question may or may not be able to shed a lot of light on. If you're composing number 3 after you've had the test and you did really well on the test, that's going to give you a lot more information than if you haven't had the test yet. But you still can kind of use your own intuitive sense of going through this activity and meeting with your professor. So what worked well? What do you need to change? Would you use this kind of strategy in the future? Did it influence how you would take notes? Maybe as you were creating questions, you found, oh my gosh, I didn't take enough notes on this section to even know how to form a question. Will you study for tests any differently? And remember that it's fine to be honest here. You can say, no, this was an interesting activity, but I don't think I would ever use any of this again. I don't think I would study any differently. The way I study works well for me. But we just want to be able to have lots of tools in our tool belts, because then we can choose the one that works best for us. And then finally, the assessment page should be in MLA format with regards to, Times New Roman, double space, 12-point font, all that good stuff. And finally, you can see the rubric there. So what we're looking for is in the exemplary category, where I can see pre-test preparations and study strategies at work in your questions and in your reflection. And then the end there, you've got the directions for submitting your assignment. As usual, if you have questions about any of this, please reach out to me. It's always difficult with an online class to know if students are understanding the directions and they're very clear, or if they're feeling confused and they're just hesitant to reach out. But I do want to be as accessible as possible. So if you have questions or you're just confused, please let me know with a phone call, a drop by my office, or an email, or something via Blackboard Messenger, any way you can. All right, I'll see you online.